Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. I'm Reverend Matt, and I'm the Connectionalist, and today I want to look at a video by Cameron Reeker. We've done one of his videos before. He's a Catholic apologist, and I really kind of want to dive in. He has a video here called "The Protestant Dilemma," and I think it's a lot of a mixture of some nuanced arguments for Catholicism as well as some of the tired old ones that we've looked through multiple times. And so I kind of want to watch this video today with fresh eyes. I haven't watched it yet. Whenever I react, I usually watch, like, I'll click around and look at some clips and see if it's something I'm interested in doing, but I don't watch the whole thing from beginning to end. So a lot of this will be fresh to me. So let's go ahead and dive on into the video.
In a recent interview I did with Joe Heschmeyer, he made a point that by itself is strong enough to overthrow all of Protestantism. In fact, early in my reversion to the Catholic Church, I noticed this, and it immediately made all forms of Protestantism seem untenable. So if you watch this video all the way to the end,
So this is what gets so annoying about Catholic versus Protestant apologetics is like, watch, this one argument will make you, these three arguments will make you leave Protestantism forever. These three will make you realize Catholics are heretics. It's all just getting a little cringe, isn't it? And it's completely, I think a lot of online debate between Catholics and Protestants is just becoming a little less dialogue and learning and a little bit more just like cringe, like gotcha moments that are completely devoid of the ecumenical spirit. And I really try not to do that in this channel. Now, I'm going to call out stuff that I think is egregious, both within Protestantism and within Catholicism, because that's what I do here. I give opinions, right? But just this idea that like there's this new argument that no one in 20 centuries has ever thought of, and it's going to crush your Protestant hopes and dreams. It's like, come on. All right, whatever, here we go.
Guarantee you'll have a good understanding of this Protestant dilemma and why, if what the Bible says about the church is true, Protestantism must be false. So here is the clip from my interview with Joe. If you want to see that whole video, I'll link it at the end of this video.
Jesus requires unity. When he's praying for his future disciples in John 17, the one thing he prays for is that we'll all remain one. He knows all of the scandals and corruption and bad popes and all of this stuff. And he doesn't say, I pray that you'll break away from the visible church. Nope. He prays we'll all remain one. At the same time, our oneness cannot come at the cost of truth because Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. So we need truth and unity. Yeah. Protestants always find themselves in a balancing act of saying, okay, well, I want to stay with this body for the sake of unity, but they're not getting everything right in my view. So for the sake of truth, maybe I should break away. And so you choose truth or unity. Neither of those is a permissible thing to cut aside in the favor of the other one. You can't have 50% of one, 50% of the other. You need unity in the truth. And Catholicism is uniquely qualified to offer that. If at least recognize, if the Catholic claims about infallibility are correct, then we're able to do the two things Christ calls for, of being united and being united in the truth.
Catholics aren't united in any, what are you talking about? See, this is the stuff that's just getting so cringe, is that, like, in the Catholic world, Protestants have plenty of cringe stuff too, and I'll cover that as well. But in the Catholic world, it's, oh, well, we have the infallibility, we have the truth, we have the unity. There was look, I'm a pro-LGBT guy in the church, and I'm much to the chagrin of many people who watch this channel. But the idea that, like, the Catholic Church is united on everything is a frankly ridiculous opinion. It's ridiculous. It's so, like, ostrich tier. And what I mean by ostrich tier is just like bury your head in the sand and pretend the world around you doesn't exist. You literally have in Rome, like, them holding like LGBT services in the Catholic Church when the Catholic Church says you can't do that. But the Catholic Church isn't doing anything about it. It's been a controversy online for the last few weeks, and there will be plenty of people in the comments that go, well, we allow some, there can be some push up the glasses and go, well, actually, Pastor Matt, here's the thing. It doesn't matter if it's allowed or it's not allowed. The idea that every Catholic is of one mind on everything is ridiculous. Even on some of the essentials. I know plenty of Catholics who aren't united even on all the dogmas, and they don't even understand or know that they're supposed to believe in all the dogmas. And so This idea that the Catholic Church is the only church that has truth and unity is ridiculous. No human institution has complete unity or complete truth. It doesn't. No one human institution has a complete market on the truth and is completely right about everything. So anyway.
And Protestantism is actually constitutionally incapable of doing this.
No.
Protestantism, no matter how well-intentioned, how holy, how brilliant, how orthodox, how devout a person is, they're incapable of creating a communion that is both unified and truthful, because human beings aren't always going to agree with each other.
Right. So human beings aren't always going to agree with each other, except for when they do in our church.
And if infallibility doesn't exist, then you can't live out the commands of Christ.
So did you catch it? Joe just laid out this Protestant dilemma. So the point Joe is making here is, in order to remain Protestant, you either have to conclude that Jesus didn't provide the church with the means to maintain visible unity, or the means to know the whole truth of.
No, Jesus provided us the means to attain visible unity. And what he means by this, and this is another thing I don't like, is a lot of times YouTubers will just say stuff and they don't explain it to people. But what he's meaning by visible unity is the unity visible of the visible institution. Jesus did provide us the means. The Roman Catholic Church broke it. They broke that. They excommunicated Luther. Luther never wanted to be excommunicated. The Reformers never wanted to be excommunicated. They didn't want to start their own churches. The Roman Catholic Church is the one who splintered off the people who disagreed, and so they felt they had to do it. And so, sure, you think you're right, but we think we're right. So do you understand how there's no new arguments under the sun that are going to all of a sudden make every Protestant become Catholic? It's a waste of airtime. I don't even know why I'm watching this video. It's very frustrating because I am a high believer in intellectual honesty, and this is why this stuff is so frustrating, is because I can't bring myself to make a video like this. I just can't do it because I just feel like it's not intellectually honest. There's nothing new under the sun that's going to make every Catholic become Protestant or every Protestant become Catholic. And that's why we need to watch these videos, and I feel like I need to provide commentary to them to help you as the viewer to be a more discerning person and not just let some YouTube video called The Protestant Dilemma rock your faith to your core and be like, oh my gosh, am I actually damned because I go to the Episcopal Church?
The faith. And this video is not going to be an apologetic video for the Pope explaining how he solves these issues and why everyone should become Catholic. This is just pointing out a constitutional flaw in Protestantism. So the point here is that in order to be Protestant, you either have to fall into one of two camps. You have to fall into a sort of religious relativism or a sort of Christian relativism, where you say that, yes, Lutherans have a good faith. Calvinists have a good faith. Maybe you even say Catholics have a good faith.
Yeah.
And we can't.
Yeah. Because that's what the scriptures say.
Know the truth with certainty because Jesus didn't provide us with the means to know exactly what the true faith is. And so we all have to agree that, yes, we have.
But do you think that do you think the Catholic apologists have ever wondered, what if we're wrong? What if we are the ones that are wrong? See, that's the arrogance in the Catholic position, is there's no, we can't be wrong. We're infallible. Our magisterium is infallible. And the Protestants are willing to say, yeah, we think we're right. We're pretty sure we're right, but we could also be wrong. And so the Catholics also have a good faith because they're people who believe in Jesus.
Enough of the truth to be saved. Lutherans are saved, Calvinists are saved, maybe even those Catholics.
Yeah, they are saved. They're all saved because Paul says they are, right? If you confess with your lips that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, then you will be saved. That's from the Bible, actually. That's from Romans.
Are saved. And this is a sort of religious indifference.
And I'm trying really hard here. You guys know me. I do pretty good most of the time. I try not to get fired up. One thing that fires me up, though, is just stuff that might... What I think of when I watch a video like this is a young person. I serve on a college campus. What I think about is college men and women who might watch a video like this and not sleep well tonight because they're Protestant. And because the intellectual honesty just isn't there. That's what frustrates me.
That I think most Protestants find themselves in. The problem with this way of thinking is that various Protestants disagree about fundamental aspects of the faith. Some Protestants don't even call Catholics Christians.
Yeah, that's true, and those Protestants are wrong.
Some Protestants think that you should baptize infants, and some Protestants think that's absolutely a horrible idea.
Yeah, well, it's a secondary issue that we can disagree on because it's not a matter of salvation. It doesn't have a core effect on your salvation. And it's not a part of the Apostles' Creed. It's not a part of any of the early ecumenical councils. And so, yeah, it's an issue we can agree or disagree on.
You see all these divisions even within the oldest forms of Protestantism. Calvin and Luther, while they were still alive, they met and they would not shake hands with one another because they knew they were not in communion. Their theologies were that different. Think about all these core issues that are hotly contended within Protestantism, especially in...
Yeah, well, Calvin and Luther were wrong about that. They were men. Sometimes we treat like, the Luther and Calvin and the Pope and like all these people, like they're like these untouchable people who never made mistakes. John Wesley, the founder of Methodism, made tremendous mistakes. John Wesley, I have made some bad mistakes in my life. Many people have. John Wesley made pretty big mistakes just like you and just like me. He was a flawed person. I mean, he fell in love with a woman who was much younger than him, didn't do anything about it, and then when she promised to marry somebody else, he denied her the sacraments out of spite and then got run out of town in the middle of the night. That's a very TLDR version of the story. It has more nuance than that. But he made tremendous mistakes in his life. He got married to a woman that he ended up basically calling the devil. He hated her. They did not like each other. Life is messy, and so we're like, Luther and Calvin wouldn't shake hands with each other. That must mean that they weren't in communion. It's like, no, dude, they were just arrogant and wrong. They were wrong. Luther and Calvin, very smart people, but they're men, and they're fallible.
Infant baptism and the real presence in the Eucharist. Protestants don't have a way to settle these disputes. It's a constant...
We do within our own systems, like the United Methodist Church has disputes. We have a judicial council that helps interpret our magisterial authority, and that's the final word on the interpretation of our Book of Discipline. And we have a general conference which can make changes to the Book of Discipline. So we have high authorities to solve our problems within our denomination. And when there are differences outside of like our denomination, between the denominations, we just say, you know what? Calvinism is wrong, but I also could be wrong. Right? And so we just have this kind of mutual acceptance that that's not an issue. What you believe about soteriology or the theology of salvation and how it works is probably not necessary for salvation. And so those are Christians and we're going to treat them as such. I don't know. I just don't understand why that's such a big deal.
Constitutional flaw in Protestantism. It's not a bug, it's a feature of sola scriptura. There is no practical means in Protestantism where two Christians can disagree with one another and have their disagreement resolved by a higher authority.
That's such a load of garbage. That's just not even true. That is a load of garbage. Sorry, that's a not unflattering pause for let me take that off. That's just a load of garbage. That's not true. If two people with theological differences in my denomination have a dispute, we have a bishop who can resolve that dispute. And if they want to appeal it to the bishop, they can take it to the judicial council, which has a final ruling on the matter. And it's done. So that's literally just factually not true. You see what I'm saying? We just say stuff on the internet. And that's what's frustrating. We just say stuff so we can get the clicks. And it's very frustrating because kind of stuff is just not intellectually honest.
Does not have what Jesus promised his church in Matthew 18. Jesus says, if two of you have a dispute, take it to the church, and the church has the final authority.
Yeah, and I just explained to you how that works in my church.
Well, which church? The Calvinist church, the Lutheran church, the
the church system in which you belong to.
Denominational church? They're all going to have different answers for your question. No. This is not what Jesus intended. So to make this super clear, let's pretend that somebody is...
You know what, guys? I'm feeling called to Rome. This is it. This is the big argument. They finally cracked the code. I'm going to become a Catholic. This is it. You see, that's how the video started. You're gonna have, this is an argument that's so good it cause a dilemma in your faith, and you're gonna realize you got to become Catholic and come back to Rome. Stuff's just cringe.
An atheist, and they're considering entering into Christianity for the first time, and they want to know which form of Christianity is right. And in this hypothetical, they're choosing between Lutheranism and non-denominational Christianity, let's say. Well, this atheist would go to the Lutheran church and ask what they teach and see where they argue from the Bible to prove their points. And then he'd go to the non-denominational church and he'd see the same thing.
Sure.
And now let's say that this atheist is having a child and he wants to know, do I need to baptize my child whenever I enter into the church or not? He'll go to the Lutheran church and they'll make their argument from Scripture. They'll say, baptism is the new circumcision, and circumcision happened on the 8th day. Therefore, we baptize infants. And he'll go to the non-denominational church and he'll say, well, what do you think? And they'll say, well, we baptize only adults, because in the Bible there's no explicit reference of an infant being baptized, and so we don't do what the Bible doesn't say. And he'll say, okay, that makes sense too. Now, here's the question. Both of them are making biblical arguments. Both of them have their proof texts.
This is the tired old
and both
arguments.
of them are coming to radically, completely contradictory interpretation.
Yeah, but then he's going to wander into the Catholic Church and ask what their position is, and it's going to be different from the Lutherans and the non-denominational. So he's going to be like, which one do I trust? It's not like he's magically going to walk into a Roman Catholic Church and be like, you know what? Because of the Pope, I was an atheist, but because you guys have the Pope, I believe you. That's just, it doesn't make any sense. Please, someone explain to me, and don't worry, there will be somebody who'll write a 500-word college essay in the comments explaining why I'm wrong, but on just a face value, this doesn't make any sense.
Of the same scriptures. How do I know which one is correct or not? How does this atheist figure out if he should baptize this baby he's having or not whenever he enters?
He's got to make a choice on what he believes. Is he taking the more Protestant, child baptism position, or the more or the evangelical, believers baptism position, or is he going to do the infant baptism position of the Roman Catholic Church? Eventually, people have to make a decision. That's how they decide. That's how people typically make decisions on faith. They research it, they look at the different ones and say, that's the one I agree with the most. I don't know what we're talking about here.
Into Christianity for the first time. Because if a reasonable person was just looking at the texts without any history of the fathers, any history of the church, any sort of information like that, you could argue from the text alone that this interpretation of Scripture is correct or that one. So how do you know which Christian is right? How do you know who has the authority to interpret?
You don't, because the Catholics could also be wrong. They just think they're perfect and infallible. It's wild to me that a Catholic who believes in Catholic papal infallibility or the infallibility of the magisterium then thinks somehow their own belief about their own self-infallibility is going to somehow be more comforting to an atheist who's looking at Christianity for the first time. Actually, probably most people are going to look at that and be like, that seems kind of weird, man, that you guys think that your councils can't make any mistakes. My experience with agnostics and atheists is they're going to think that's kind of weird.
These scriptures. Now let's take it one step further. Let's say he reads some of the church fathers. He reads what Hippolytus, Augustine, and Origen say about the baptism of infants, and he decides.
This is an interesting hypothetical now because we have an atheist and agnostic who's now reading all of the church fathers. That happens. It's not that that doesn't happen. It's just in my pastoral experience, people who are atheists and agnostics do not come to faith by reading the church fathers. They come to faith through their friends and the experience they have of Jesus through the church.
Decides to become Lutheran. Well, now he has a really difficult question to answer after that. He's become Lutheran, but has he become Lutheran because it is the truth, it is the one true faith, and all other faiths are insufficient or erroneous? I don't even know if that's what Lutherans teach. I know that most Protestants don't view themselves as having the only one true, intact, perfect, pristine faith handed once for all to the saints.
No, because we have an appropriate view of humanity and humanity's problems. And we don't have a doctrine that says the ecumenical councils are infallible, even though we bury our head in the sand and pretend like they haven't said different things over the last 500 to 1,000 years and pretend like, oh, it's still infallible, even though we've changed our mind on some things. It's silliness.
That's not really how Protestants generally view their own religion. They fall into camp number one, which is this sort of religious indifferentism. I chose to be Lutheran, but the non-denominationals, they'll probably be in heaven too, it's okay. Or I chose to be Calvinist, but the Lutherans, they're pretty close, they're okay too. And maybe, if you're extreme, you might say even those Catholics can get into heaven.
That is not extreme. That's not an extreme Protestant position. I would say the extreme Protestant position is that Catholics don't go to heaven. I don't really know any ministers in the Methodist Church that don't think Catholics go to heaven.
So what are you doing here? Well, this atheist who's decided to become Lutheran, he has to choose either to say all other Christians are wrong and I am correct, which is something that I don't.
Can we look at the arguments for Catholicism that are like good? The Catholic arguments that are good are like, hey, our traditions are really cool. I think saints are unnecessary, but they're kind of neat. We have really impactful, powerful worship that goes back many centuries, right? Like, there's plenty of good reasons to become Catholic that isn't the ecumenical councils are infallible.
I don't even think Lutheranism teaches. Or you have to say that the truth is unknown. The truth can't be known with the degree of certainty that would exclude other Christians from heaven. And that's just contrary to what the scriptures teach. Matthew 18, Jesus says, if you have a disagreement with a brother, you take it to the church, and the church has the final say. Which church? Well, it's the one
you're in.
Jesus found.
Jesus did found one visible institution. And the mainline Protestants and the Catholics and the Eastern Orthodox all have inheritance of that one visible institution, okay? And I think even the evangelicals, while they're not so much a part, it's so different that it's hard to be a part of that. I even would include them in the visible institution. But this idea that, like, no, you have to be in the correct visible institution, right? The one visible institution divided because of humans. Humans struggle to agree. The Eastern Orthodox, they think the Roman Catholics left the church, right? That's how I've heard Eastern Orthodox people articulate it before, right? And so this idea that there's only one institution, like legal institution, you can be a part of, instead of looking at Roman Catholics, Eastern Orthodox, the seven mainline Protestant traditions, and some of the evangelical traditions, looking at the Orthodox Christians saying this is all one visible institution that has like subdivisions of it, right? That's the best way to look at it. It's one visible institution with like subdivisions of it that should all be yearning to become one division again and should be yearning for unity. That's the best way to look at it, not this idea that like the Roman Catholic Church Incorporated is the only church you can be a part of.
Founded. It's not the one Luther founded. It's not the one Calvin founded. It's not the one that somebody with a 4-year Bible degree founded. It's not that. It is the Catholic Church. So if you're a Protestant and you don't accept the authority of the Catholic Church to interpret the scriptures, then you come down to this dilemma. Either you have to say, I have the whole truth and everyone else who doesn't is not in communion with me, and you sacrifice unity, which is what Jesus prayed for in John 17.
There's more to unity than that.
Or you say, yeah, I have enough of the truth. I may not be totally right, but we really can't know. Maybe we all have some of the truth and it's all good enough. And you sacrifice the truth. And you end up in communion with a lot of people, but not in any real practical way. You all disagree about fundamental aspects of the faith. So if you're going to be a Protestant, you have to decide, which are you going to sacrifice, truth or unity?
You don't have to say all the dogmas in order to have truth, right? Also, I think the proper view of humanity is that when humans are involved and our minds are involved, we are not ever going to have the fullness of the truth because it gets marred by our own sin and our own inability to see each other, which is why it is best to look at the Bible as the only infallible rule of faith on matters of salvation, right? Not magisterial authority. It's better to trust magisterial authority should be very highly authoritative, just not infallible. That's the only difference. We're just saying it's not infallible. It is highly authoritative, it's just not infallible because humans are involved. That is a completely reasonable view of humanity.
Always this precarious balancing act that you have to have as a Protestant because you don't have any way to maintain unity with a visible head, and you don't have any way to obtain clarity through an official authoritative magisterium.
That's just not true. Like, one, there's a lot of disunity in the Catholic Church. You've got American Catholics who are pro-choice, and you can easily say, well, they're out of communion with the church. Well, nobody's disciplining them. Nobody's doing anything about it. You've got pro-LGBT Catholics. So it's you guys are not of, the Catholics are not of one mind on everything, and I don't see the Pope or the bishops really doing a whole heck of a lot about it because they're exercising at least some semblance of like letting people speak their mind on issues and not trying to die on every hill, right? So the idea that the Roman Catholic Church is the only church that has all the truth and all the unity is just a ridiculous claim when you look at it for longer than 10 seconds. There's no full unity there. And there's, I don't think they have the fullness of truth, just like I don't think I have the fullness of truth or the Calvinists have fullness of truth. I think they have the truth in part. And I think together collectively, if we can find unity with each other, we can get closer to the truth in full. But only Christ is the way and the truth and the life in full. And he is best revealed through the Holy Scriptures.
This dilemma is one of the major reasons I stopped considering Protestantism seriously in college, and it's one of the major reasons I chose to be Catholic today. Of all the Christian religions, Catholicism offers the most satisfying and most practical solution to this dilemma. When you're Catholic, you have a visible head on earth, and you can tell who you're in communion with because everyone who you're in communion with is also in communion with the Pope of Rome. And you can tell what you have to believe in order to be saved and what you are free to disagree about in theological speculation, because we have a magisterium headed by the Pope who says yes this and no that. It's Matthew 18. Whenever there is a dispute between believers, they take it to the church and the church rules.
But what about that time that you said all Protestants are going to hell, and then Vatican II was like, they're just dearly departed brethren, right? Those are two different things. I'm sorry, it is. Can you just be honest about that? It's two different things. And so the whole magisterial infallibility just kind of falls apart.
And the church rules with the authority of Christ himself. Jesus says to his apostles, he who hears you hears me. Jesus says to Peter and to his church.
Right, but the Roman Catholic Church isn't the only one that has a claim to the faith of the apostles. It doesn't. So it's just arrogant. This is one of the things I don't like. And you know what's funny? Here's something else I want to say, because I feel like I've been dogging Catholics. But you know what? Most Catholics, they don't do this. I see a lot of it in Catholic apologetics. I see it in a lot of Catholic apologetics done mostly among the laity. I don't see priests saying stuff like this all the time. I do a little bit, obviously. But this is not how everybody articulates the supremacy of the Catholic Church within Catholicism. So I want to throw that out there. A lot of you Catholics don't articulate this stuff or don't do it with any kind of. I think a lot of Catholics do it with more intellectual honesty. I'll be frank with you. There's just so many of these videos, and I'm sure. Look, I'm not trying to dog Cameron too much. I seriously disagree with him. And I question the intellectual honesty of the piece. Because I have listed to you all the reasons and why these are not new arguments. These are not new things that are being brought up. This is all gone through the gamut many times.
Whatever you bind on earth will have been bound in heaven. If heaven ratifies the decision of the church, it cannot be erroneous. These are the seeds of papal infallibility. This is why at the end of John's gospel, Peter is appointed as the head shepherd over the entire church. In order to be in union with the flock of Christ, you must be in union with the head shepherd. And this is also why in Matthew 16, Jesus promises that Peter's faith will not fail. As Catholics, we believe that Peter's faith lives in his successors today. And so since Christ...
Yeah, I mean, I get the argument, right, for the Pope. Like, I understand it, right? But the problem is like the massive amount of corruption within the church in the Middle Ages required a reformation. And I truly believe that God called Luther and the other reformers to reform the Catholic Church. I don't think God called people to start a new church. I think God was calling for reform of the one church that God was trying to hold in unity. But then that one church excommunicated all the reformers. And so they were forced to basically start their own church. And we have been seeking to be back in communion ever since. And I hope that most Protestants want to be in communion with Catholics. I hope to be in communion with them once again. But the problem is the corruption of the faith got so far away, got a lot, in my opinion, in the Middle Ages. I think it's better now. In the Middle Ages, there became a lot of superstition. There became a lot of stuff that just was not centered on the scriptures and on the original intention of the faith, that the Reformation had to happen. And by the way, that's not just my position. That was the position of Pope Francis. Pope Francis basically said Luther was right about a lot of stuff. And the Catholic Church, if I'm not mistaken, has also admitted that the idea of the Bishop of Rome being the first among equals instead of like the supreme pontiff was basically how the early church operated. And that the supremacy of the Bishop of Rome was a later development.
Christ promised that Peter's faith would not fail, and Peter's faith lives on in his successors. Whenever the successors of Peter invoke this promise of Christ, their teaching cannot fail. Why? Because of their superpower, because of their super intellectual abilities? No, but because the promise of Christ said Peter's faith will not fail, and Peter's faith is alive and well today in Pope Leo.
But what about when the popes of the Middle Ages did a bunch of really bad stuff, like objectively bad stuff, like really bad stuff? It's like, I don't know, it just calls into question the whole thing. And it's just kind of silly. I think all of this is going to break in Catholicism whenever there's a pope that won't retire or won't step down and start saying really weird stuff because they maybe have like dementia or something like that. I think that's going to happen one day, and it's going to make people really question, like, oh, wait a second. Maybe like the authority of the Pope should be supreme authority, but it shouldn't be infallible authority. Those are two things. I think I'm totally fine with the Pope having like supreme authority over the Roman Catholic Church. I think that makes sense to have like a one head person. But infallible authority, and I know people are going to say, well, it's only when he speaks ex cathedra and only, on these certain issues. It doesn't matter. If there's any kind of infallibility granted to a person, it becomes problematic. And one day there is going to be a pope who says something ex cathedra that is very different from the Catholic Church's current teaching, and it's going to throw everything into chaos because they either want to do it or they are maybe aging and mentally ill by that point. It's going to happen, and it's going to call into question all of the authority stuff that they've been talking about. So, yeah.
Now, obviously, there are many people who don't live up to the church's teaching. Even bishops and leaders in the church sometimes fail to live up to this standard. But we as Catholics know what we ought to believe and ought to do. If you met a Catholic...
So do Methodists. Methodists know what they ought to believe and ought to do. We have a book of discipline. We have articles of religion. And just like he said, people don't live into it. Sometimes people don't believe it. But the authority is there for all the people called Methodists that say these are the things that we believe and what we ought to believe. There's no difference.
And a Catholic was practicing contraception, you would know that that Catholic was not practicing their faith, or at least not in the full sense. If you went up to a Catholic and they said, I deny the Immaculate Conception, you would know that they're calling themselves Catholic, but directly contradicting one of the church's official teachings. And so saying that you know a Catholic that uses contraception or doesn't believe the Immaculate Conception, that's not a good argument against Catholicism. That's just showing that people who know what the Catholic faith is deny certain aspects of it. And this can happen to bishops.
Yeah, but then there's no difference. Cameron, there's no difference. Like in the Protestant church, if you select any of the institutions in the mainline Protestantism, we also have a set of guidelines and doctrinal statements that people know what they ought to believe, or at least should know what they ought to believe. It's in the Book of Discipline in Methodism. And if they say something like, I don't think Jesus is God, well, they're not in alignment with the doctrinal statements of the Methodist Church. It's no different. Like, I don't understand. Someone help me understand why people think this is different.
Or even the Pope. The Pope is only rendered infallible whenever he's invoking this promise of Christ as the shepherd of all Christians. And I have other videos laying that out with much more detail, but
still problematic.
Suffice it to say, the Pope is only infallible under certain conditions. So this is the Protestant dilemma, and this is why I think everyone who is Protestant should leave. You should leave Protestantism, because if you don't have a religion that has the means...
I also would never, ever, 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 ever. I will make a video that says why you should be Protestant. Okay, I've made those videos. I will never, ever, ever tell a Catholic to leave Catholicism. Ever. If you're Catholic, you should stay Catholic. You're saved, and the Catholic Church is valid. And telling people, like, let's go back and get the actual quote again.
Erroneous. These are the seeds of papal infallibility.
Ooh, I went way
this
too
is
far.
why at the end of John's Gospel, Peter is only infallible under certain conditions.
Okay.
So this is the Protestant dilemma, and this is why I think everyone who is Protestant should leave.
This is why I think everybody who's Protestant should leave. All of our churches should be destroyed. There you go.
You should leave
You decide what you think about this.
Protestantism, because if you don't have a religion that has the means in place to preserve both truth and unity, then you do not have the religion that Christ prayed for.
You decide whether you want the arrogance of this argument or you want the humility that says, hey, Catholics are Christians, Lutherans are Christians, everyone who calls upon the name of the Lord Jesus, right? If you confess with your lips that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, then you will be saved. You know, John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son so that all who believe in him shall not perish but have everlasting life. Like if you want the freedom that comes with that, you go be Catholic, go be Protestant. And I'm not telling you to leave the Catholic faith, but you decide whether this is for Catholics. This is not the arrogance that you want, frankly. This is not what Christianity is, where it's telling other people's faith. Like it's just, this is really problematic stuff. And you don't have to make these arguments and tell all Protestants to leave their churches in order to be a Catholic. You can still believe that you're the one true church. But I mean, I understand that, like, if you're the one true church, I guess you got to tell people to leave Protestantism. It's just for all the viewers watching this, you got to decide if that's what you want to be a part of.
Do not have the church that Jesus instituted. So in this video, we've covered the Protestant dilemma, how in order to remain Protestant, you must either sacrifice truth for the sake of unity or unity for the sake of truth. Jesus Christ established.
All right, I'm going to finish this video up because I've said my piece. I've said enough. Look, here's the thing. We gotta be better as people. I'm going to keep tackling these videos because I think it's really important. I think there's a lot of young people watching who watch this stuff and they're questioning their salvation. And I'm here to tell you, you don't have to worry about that. If you confess with your lips that Jesus is Lord, if you believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, then you will be saved. Faith without works is dead. So you do need to have a transformed life and show fruit of those works. And the local church can help you to do that and to be more in communion with the church and more in communion with God. If you are thinking about becoming a Catholic and you're about to enter Catholicism, I think you should do it. I just want you to follow Christ. And if that makes sense in Catholicism, great. Lutheranism, great. Methodism, great. Just pick an Orthodox Christian faith, one of the mainline Protestant churches. If you got to go to an evangelical non-denom, do it. But I would obviously recommend mainline Protestant churches or Catholic churches or Eastern Orthodox Church. I try to be very ecumenical, and it's hard. It's really hard to be ecumenical when one side just continues to say that, like, we're not enough as Christians. So it's really frustrating. So let me know what you think in the comments. Please be respectful. I tried to be respectful in this video. I got heated because this stuff is very important to me, and these issues are very close to my heart. But do your best to be respectful. We can be respectful while also having a critical eye. And it's okay to levy harsh criticism and to question the intellectual honesty of an argument. But we can do so without attacking a person's life and character. So let's do our best to do that. So thank you for joining me today for a tough video. Let me know what you think in the comments. And until next time, I'm Reverend Matt, and I'm the Connectionalist. I'll see you again. Bye-bye.